Throughout life, we encounter people who, in one way or another, leave a mark on our story. Some teach us the true meaning of love, loyalty, and genuine connection, while others seem to come into our lives only to remind us what disappointment feels like. But what happens when we hold on to someone who doesn't value us? Why is it so hard to let go of those who clearly don't reciprocate in the way we deserve? Carl Jung had a profound answer for this. It's not just about the other person, but about what that connection reflects about ourselves. The human unconscious operates through symbols and repetitive patterns. If you've ever felt like you keep attracting the same kind of harmful relationships or struggle to break free from dynamics where you give more than you receive, it's not a coincidence. It's a manifestation of your unconscious projecting unresolved internal conflicts. And this is where the importance of letting go comes in. It's not just an act of external liberation, but a deep process of self-awareness. When you insist on holding on to something that clearly wears you down, what you're really doing is ignoring a lesson your own psyche is trying to teach you. Think about all those times when, deep down, you knew a relationship wasn't good for you, but you stayed anyway. Maybe you justified their behavior, believed they'd change over time, or thought that if you tried harder, they'd see you differently. The truth is, the problem doesn't lie with the other person, but in what that relationship triggers within you. Jung explained that our most complex relationships are a reflection of our shadow, that hidden side of our personality we often refuse to acknowledge. The shadow isn't inherently bad, but when we don't recognize it, it controls us from the darkness. If deep down you feel you're not valuable enough, if you believe you need to fight for someone to love you, then you'll inevitably attract situations that reinforce that belief. Jung said that until we make the unconscious conscious, it will keep directing our lives, and we'll call it fate. So what happens when you decide to let go? You take control of your own story. You realize you're not destined to suffer for love or beg for crumbs of attention. It's you who decides whether to stay in that draining struggle or take a step toward your true evolution. It's natural to feel fear at the idea of letting go. After all, our psyche is designed to cling to the familiar even when the familiar hurts us. The uncertainty of the unknown can feel terrifying, but Jung taught us that real growth only happens when we face that inner darkness. Letting go of someone who doesn't value us is, at its core, an act of self-love. It's telling your unconscious, I recognize myself, I respect myself, and I choose relationships that align with my worth. Letting go doesn't mean hating or wishing ill on the other person. It means freeing yourself from the need to fit into a story where you clearly don't belong. It means giving yourself the chance to create new experiences where you're truly seen and appreciated for who you are without forcing anything. Along the way, you'll discover that when you let go of what doesn't belong to you, your energy shifts, and with it, the people and situations you attract into your life. Synchronicity, a key concept in Jung's theory, tells us that nothing in our lives happens by accident. Every relationship, every encounter, every breakup carries a deeper meaning than we realize. If a relationship has pushed you to your limit, if it's made you question your worth, it's because something within you needs healing. And often, that healing only comes when you have the courage to say, enough. Your unconscious is always communicating with you, sending you signals, but we often ignore them because we're too busy justifying the pain. We tell ourselves maybe we're overreacting, that love requires sacrifice, that if we hold on a little longer, things will get better. But the truth is, love isn't about constant struggle or proving your worth. True love, the kind that truly nurtures and expands you, flows naturally. If you have to convince someone to value you, then you're not in the right place. It's time to start trusting that inner voice, the intuition we've so often silenced. Your unconscious already knows what you need, but it's up to you to decide to act on it. Ask yourself, what do I really deserve? And if the answer is genuine love, respect, and reciprocity, then start moving toward those experiences. Stop holding on to what breaks you. Let go with confidence, with gratitude for what you've learned, and with the certainty that what's coming is infinitely better. When you choose to let go, something within you changes profoundly. You stop trying to fit into a mold that doesn't suit you, or striving for crumbs of affection from someone who was never willing to give you more. In that moment, a psychological phenomenon Jung described as the integration of the shadow takes place. That part of you that once begged for love, that sought validation in the wrong places, begins to light up with awareness. And when you become aware, you stop being a slave to unconscious patterns. People often resist letting go because they think they'll lose something valuable. But how can something that makes you feel inadequate be valuable? Jung said that unnecessary suffering is a choice, and we often cling to pain out of fear of what comes next. The mind creates an illusion that this relationship is all we have, that without that person, we won't find anything better. But this is nothing more than a trick of the ego, a deception of the unconscious that keeps us tied to what we know deep down isn't good for us. This is where Jung's concept of individuation, one of his most important ideas, comes into play. Individuation means recognizing your intrinsic worth and stopping defining yourself through others. It's understanding that you don't need someone else to validate your existence to feel complete. It's a journey toward authenticity, a path where you discover that the most important love you can experience doesn't come from outside, but from within. But this journey can't begin if you keep clinging to a story that no longer makes sense. It's curious how we often hold on to toxic or one-sided relationships, hoping the other person will change, wake up one day, and realize our worth. But if you really think about it, this desire to be seen by someone who doesn't appreciate us only reflects a deeper wound within. Why do we seek validation from someone external? Why do we feel we need someone's approval to feel enough? Jung explained that these dynamics stem from unresolved wounds in our psyche, often rooted in childhood. Maybe we learned to associate love with sacrifice. Maybe at some point we were taught that we have to fight to be loved. But someone who truly belongs in your life won't make you feel like you have to struggle for their attention. And if right now you're in a relationship where you constantly feel the need to prove your worth, it's a clear sign that this connection isn't aligned with your essence. Letting go of someone who doesn't value you isn't just an act of self-love. It's an act of psychological maturity. It means you've reached a point where you recognize you can't keep pouring your energy into something that only drains you. It means you've understood that your time, your love, and your presence are a gift, and not everyone deserves access to them, because when you realize your own worth, the dynamics shift. You stop settling for the bare minimum. You stop chasing people who don't want to stay. You stop trying to fit into spaces that make you feel small. Instead, you become someone who consciously chooses what kind of relationships you want in your life. Often, the fear of loneliness is what keeps people from letting go. But Jung taught us that loneliness isn't the enemy. The real problem is disconnection from ourselves. You can be surrounded by people and still feel completely alone if you don't have a deep relationship with yourself. On the other hand, when you manage to connect with yourself, when you know yourself at your core, loneliness stops being an issue. You no longer need external validation. You no longer depend on someone else's presence to feel whole. In that state, relationships stop being a necessity and become a choice. You're with someone not because you need them, but because you genuinely choose them from a place of fullness, not lack. The transformation begins when you stop focusing on what you've lost and start seeing what you've gained. Maybe right now letting go feels like the most painful thing you could do, but what if it's actually the step that will lead you to a more authentic life? Jung would say that every profound change comes with an internal crisis, and that's what you're experiencing now. The discomfort of stepping out of an emotional comfort zone that, though harmful, was familiar. But that discomfort is temporary. It's the necessary process to be reborn, to rebuild yourself from a place of self-love and awareness. Think of it this way. Every time you hold on to someone who doesn't value you, you're closing the door to those who would. As long as you keep pouring your energy into a relationship that doesn't reciprocate, there won't be space for something better to come into your life. The universe doesn't bring new opportunities your way when you're still clinging to the old. Letting go isn't a loss. It's a liberation. It's an act of faith in yourself, in your ability to attract healthy relationships, in your right to be loved the way you deserve. The biggest mistake you can make is waiting for someone to change so your life can improve. Jung said that true change always starts from within. So instead of waiting for the other person to transform, to wake up one day and value you, start valuing yourself enough to close that chapter. Because when you realize your own worth, everything in your life shifts. The people who once ignored your presence suddenly notice your absence. Those who took your love for granted start to realize what they've lost. But by then, it's no longer about them. It's about you, your growth, your new way of seeing life. And here's where something incredible happens. When you decide to let go, when you finally release what wasn't meant for you, the universe responds. Opportunities start to appear. Genuine connections come into your life. And what once felt like an unbearable void becomes a space of possibility and renewal. Not because someone else fills it, but because now you're the one occupying that space with self-love, with authenticity, with the certainty that you deserve better. Don't underestimate the power of a decision. When you choose to let go, you're not just freeing yourself from a relationship that wasn't good for you. You're taking the first step toward a new version of yourself, a version that no longer settles for less than it deserves, that no longer begs for love, that no longer needs to convince anyone of its worth. Because when you truly know and love yourself, life begins to reflect that love in everything around you. When you make the decision to let go, a part of you will resist. The ego will try to cling to the story you've built, to the illusion of what could have been, to the hope that if you wait long enough, something will change. But time doesn't change people. People change when they decide to. And if someone hasn't shown the intention to value you by now, waiting will only make you lose more of what you've already given. Carl Jung explained that attachment to a relationship that doesn't belong to us isn't just an emotional bond. It's a representation of a deeper, internal struggle. You're not just fighting for the relationship, you're fighting against an unconscious belief that without that person, you won't be valuable enough. But the truth is, your worth has never depended on someone else's gaze. Your value is something that's always been within you, but perhaps you haven't learned to recognize it because you've spent too long searching for it in the wrong eyes. When you let go, you free yourself from that struggle. You no longer need to prove anything or demonstrate your love through unnecessary sacrifices. On the contrary, letting go becomes a supreme act of self-love. It's the decision to choose yourself, to stop waiting for someone to see you when you can start seeing yourself. It's understanding that true connection is never forced, never begged for, never pleaded for. Real connection happens when two souls are in tune, when both choose to be there without conditions. There's something incredibly powerful that happens when you take that step. You stop living based on what the other person will or won't do, and you start reclaiming your own energy. That energy you'd placed in someone else, wasted on worries, on trying to fit in, on attempting to save what couldn't be saved, it comes back to you. And with that reclaimed energy, you begin to transform. You start seeing clearly what you ignored before. You realize how much you were denying yourself by holding on to something that wasn't yours. And most importantly, you open yourself to possibilities. Synchronicity, that fundamental principle Jung described as the way the universe guides us through meaningful coincidences, becomes evident in your life. New people arrive, opportunities appear, and you realize life was never against you. It was just waiting for you to have the courage to let go of the old to allow the new to come in. But none of this can happen if you stay trapped in the same story. If you keep spending your energy in a place where it isn't valued. There's no more powerful act than saying enough when something no longer resonates with you. Not from resentment or bitterness, but from the full awareness that you deserve better. And this is where many people falter. They think letting go is a passive act, that it means resigning themselves to loss. But letting go isn't losing, it's winning. Winning freedom, winning space for what you truly deserve, winning a version of yourself that no longer clings to what hurts you. Jung said, there's no awakening of consciousness without pain, and letting go hurts. It hurts because it means saying goodbye to a part of your life, to a bond you invested time, love, and hope in. But that pain is temporary. What's eternal is the peace that comes afterward, the lightness of knowing you no longer have to carry a relationship that didn't flow, a love that wasn't mutual, a story that only existed in your mind but never materialized in reality. And in that process of letting go, something wonderful happens. You learn to reconnect with yourself. You discover you can be alone without feeling lonely, that you can look in the mirror without needing someone else to validate you, that you're enough, not because someone else says so, but because you've come to understand it from the depths of your being. And when you reach this point, everything changes. You no longer settle for less. You no longer tolerate what you once put up with. You no longer let the fear of loneliness keep you in places where you're not appreciated. That's the true meaning of letting go. It's not just releasing a person, it's releasing the version of yourself that thought you had to fight for love. It's saying goodbye to the fear of lack, to emotional dependency. It's a rebirth where you become someone who chooses from abundance, not desperation. Jung taught us that the most important relationship we have in life is the one we have with ourselves. And if that relationship is strong, if you truly know and value yourself, you'll never beg for love again, because you'll understand that what you truly deserve will never need to be asked for. It will come to you naturally, without effort, without struggle, without exhaustion. Letting go isn't giving up. It's having the courage to recognize you deserve more. It's stepping into the unknown with the confidence that what's coming will be far better than what you're leaving behind. And when you finally do it, when you make the decision to close that cycle, you realize that true self-love isn't about pretty words or daily affirmations in the mirror. It's about the choices you make every day. And the most powerful choice you can make is to choose yourself over any relationship that doesn't value you. When you finally choose yourself, when you decide to let go of what hurts you, something profound happens within you. The energy that was once trapped in struggle, in uncertainty, in the hope that someone else would change returns to you with a renewing strength. It's as if the weight you'd been carrying on your shoulders suddenly disappears, letting you breathe again. In that moment, you understand that it wasn't the relationship holding you back, but the belief that without it, you'd be incomplete. The fear of letting go doesn't come from the loss itself, but from the mistaken idea that without that person, you won't find something equal or better. But here's the truth. When you let go of what doesn't value you, you give yourself the chance to receive what you truly deserve. It's an act of faith in yourself, in the process of life, in the fact that what's meant for you will arrive at the right time without you forcing it. But for that to happen, you first need the courage to close the door that's keeping you trapped in a place where you're no longer happy. Jung spoke of the process of individuation as the path to wholeness, and part of that path involves learning to let go without fear, trusting that what leaves isn't a loss, but a redirection. Every time someone walks away from your life, every time a relationship breaks, there's an opportunity to ask yourself, what is this experience showing me about myself? Maybe it's the lesson that you still struggle to set boundaries, that you're still seeking approval in the wrong places, that there are parts of you that need healing before you can attract true love. When you resist letting go, what you're really doing is prolonging your own suffering. You cling to an idealized image, to a future that only exists in your mind, to the idea that if you try hard enough, everything will change. But the reality is that love shouldn't be a constant effort. It shouldn't feel like a battle where you're the only one fighting. If someone can't see your worth, if they're not willing to walk with you in respect and reciprocity, then that person isn't for you. And that's okay. Not everyone is meant to stay in our lives, but that doesn't mean you should hold on to those who've already shown they can't or won't give you what you need. The real issue isn't the person who doesn't value you. It's what you decide to do with that reality. You can keep waiting, keep justifying, keep closing your eyes to the obvious. Or you can choose to honor yourself, to stop investing your energy in something that doesn't nourish you, to open space in your life for relationships that truly bring something meaningful. Sometimes The fear of letting go comes from the idea that we'll be alone. But Jung taught us that true loneliness isn't the absence of someone else. It's disconnection from our own being. There are people surrounded by company who still feel empty because company doesn't fill the void of an inauthentic relationship. The only thing that truly fills that void is connection with yourself, with your purpose, with your essence. When you decide to let go, you send a clear message to your unconscious that you trust yourself, that you choose yourself, that you don't need to hold on to a harmful relationship to feel complete. And the moment you do that, everything starts to align because life responds to the energy you put out. When you vibrate from need, from lack, from fear, you attract more of the same. But when you vibrate from security, from self-esteem, from the conviction that you deserve better, the people who come into your life reflect that same energy. Love isn't suffering. It's not constant sacrifice or giving up your essence to please someone else. Love is free, it's expansive, it's a space where you can be yourself without fear of not being enough. If you've ever felt you have to change to be loved, if you felt you have to do more than the other person does for you, then that's not the right relationship. And that doesn't mean you should blame the other person or hold resentment. It simply means it's time to let go, to release, to trust that what's coming will be far better than what you're leaving behind. Jung said the unconscious sends us signals all the time, but often we don't want to listen. How many times have you felt something wasn't right, that something inside you was telling you that relationship wasn't for you, but you chose to ignore it? That's your intuition speaking, your unconscious trying to show you what you don't want to see. But there comes a point when you can't keep ignoring the truth. And when you decide to face it, when you decide to act on it, everything changes. It's normal to feel sadness when something ends, to miss them, to wonder what might have been if things had been different. But don't get trapped in that thought. Don't idealize what's already over. Instead, focus on everything you can build from now on. Focus on the opportunity to create healthier relationships, on the lessons this experience left you, on the person you're becoming through this process. Letting go isn't forgetting or denying what you lived through. It's simply deciding that your peace is more important than a love that doesn't do you good. It's trusting that the pain is temporary, but the liberation is permanent. It's understanding that what seems like a loss today will tomorrow feel like the beginning of something much greater. When you look back, you'll realize that every time you let go of something that wasn't meant for you, something better came into your life. Maybe not immediately, maybe you had to go through a period of rebuilding, but in the end, everything fell into place in the best way possible. And this time will be no different. This time, too, you'll find clarity, peace, the certainty that you made the best decision. The key is to trust yourself, your intuition, the certainty that what's truly meant for you will never make you doubt your worth. Don't fear letting go. Don't fear closing a door, because by doing so, you'll be opening yourself to everything you truly deserve. When you finally let go, when you make the conscious decision not to keep investing your energy in what doesn't value you, something inside you shifts irreversibly. The peace you are searching for outside, in the recognition of others, in the hope that someone would change, starts to emerge from within. You realize you never needed anyone's approval to feel complete, because fullness doesn't come from outside. It comes from the love you choose to give yourself. It's in that moment that you grasp the true lesson Jung left us. Everything we experience in our relationships is nothing more than a reflection of our own relationship with ourselves. If you clung to someone who doesn't value you, it's because on some level you haven't fully valued yourself. But now, with this new perspective, with this deeper understanding of your own being, you can't go back. You've changed. You've evolved. And now you're able to see clearly what you didn't want to accept before. By letting go, you don't just release the other person, you release yourself. You stop carrying the expectation that someone else will make you happy. You stop waiting for love to come from outside and start cultivating it within. And when you achieve this, when you truly choose yourself, when you truly put yourself first, you begin to attract relationships that reflect that self-love, no longer from need, no longer from lack, but from fullness. The fear of loneliness disappears because you realize you've never been alone. You've always had the most important person with you, yourself. And in that process of rebuilding, of rediscovering yourself, you start to see how everything in your life begins to change. Your energy transforms, your decisions become more conscious, and the people who come to you do so because they're aligned with this new version of you. What once hurt you now becomes a lesson, a memory of what you were and what you're no longer willing to tolerate. And the best part, you now have the power to inspire others, because there are so many people who, like you, have felt the pain of holding on to what doesn't belong to them. So many who haven't yet found the courage to let go, who still believe they have to settle for less than they deserve. If this message resonated with you, if at any point you felt you needed to hear these words, then there's probably someone else who needs them too. Help me bring this message to more people. Share this content. Leave your comment below and tell me which part of this message touched you. Tell me what decision you're willing to make starting today to let go of what no longer adds to your life, to choose yourself. Your interaction not only helps this message reach more people who need it, it also reinforces your commitment to yourself. Because when you take action, when you express what you feel, when you decide to share this knowledge, you're taking another step in your own transformation process. If you haven't already, subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss the upcoming messages that will keep supporting your personal growth. Together, we can build a community where self-love and awareness are at the center of everything. A community where we understand that letting go isn't losing, but gaining something far greater, the freedom to be who we truly are. Today, you took an important step by listening to this message. Now the next step is up to you. Are you ready to choose yourself? I'll see you in the next video.